Hello, I'm Kai Rosga, and welcome to Version Up, one lawyer's journey to digitally transform his legal practice. Welcome. Thanks for listening. Today, I'm really fortunate to have on the podcast Antoine Louis, an engineer, researcher, and founder in the legal tech space. A developer by trade and an educator by training, Antoine provides just the right level of detail needed to understand why the last few months have seen a truly transformational shift in the use of AI in legal. The interview is, in my humble opinion, the clearest explanation I've heard to date of where we are and where we might be headed when it comes to using AI to develop tailored solutions for lawyers. Bottom line, developments in the technology have already taken our industry into uncharted waters. We are there right now. It is the start of an era during which AI will be used to quickly deploy customizable, personalized legal solutions that address the needs of lawyers in their day-to-day practice. Big question is, how will lawyers and their enterprises respond to these changes? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, let's make sure we understand what we're dealing with. This episode, I hope, will help with that. Enjoy. Hi, Antoine. Thank you for coming on Version Up.
Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Looking forward to getting your product perspective on the legal tech space. To get us started, can you just tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm 28 years old. I have an engineering background, did a bachelor in engineering, then went to computer science for my master. And that's where I fell in love with AI. So it was in 2018, and especially with natural language processing. So I decided to dive in and went for the PhD path in a small, very international university in the Netherlands, Maastricht University. I had the chance to be part of that interdisciplinary lab where I was officially part of the faculty of law. So I was surrounded by lawyers, but I was able to choose my own topic. And so my topic was AI applied to law. Had amazing supervisors that let me really explore what I was passionate about. And at that time, it was really finding the legal information you need. I had, living in Belgium and working in the Netherlands, I had a minor tax issue. And I got really frustrated of not being able to find the information by myself. So I had to call a lawyer and get that information from there. I thought, well, we should have such legal search engine, open, accessible for basic question. And so that's where my topic for my PhD came up. I spent 4 years doing machine learning model for legal information retrieval, published everything open source, went to conferences presenting my work, and did that for 4 years, got my PhD last year. And then I wanted to get out of academia and do something into the industry, building. I actually very much like building, which in my opinion is maybe the missing part when you're doing research. And so I met 2 lawyers in Paris. We created our company and we made the bet that local and confidential AI was something that will be very important in the future, and especially in all these new era of large language model and AI. And so we built that fully offline desktop application for criminal lawyers where they can structure their criminal cases, extract information, summarize it, search for information, take notes and everything fully offline. So you can work in the plane and no data is sent to a third-party provider or sent to external servers. So that's basically what I've been doing in the past 8 years, so 6 years already in that legal AI world.
So you did research with lawyers, then you met 2 lawyers, you started a legal tech startup. You ran to the fire, not away from it.
Yeah.
Most people who have exposure to lawyers at that level of their career run for the hills. Just kidding. But an interesting time to enter the legal tech space, I imagine. Can you explain on this concept of the offline application, is this something that is tackling the security concerns, or like what is really the driver for positioning your product around being an offline product as opposed to everything's on the cloud right now, right?
So security is one, obviously. It comes with better security if everything stay on the user's machine. But it was mostly about confidentiality. As we were dealing with criminal lawyers, they are subject to secrecy, right? That are a bit stronger than the other domains in law. And so that was mandatory requirements for all clients that certification, ISO 27000 and SOC 2 type certification were not enough because officially you cannot share these cases with any third-party provider. So
Mm.
officially and in theory, you cannot even send it by email or push it to your Google Drive or iCloud drive. It has to be extremely yours, and they download it from the official French government, work on it locally with Adobe, for example. And really, we wanted to solve the frustration of them having to open Control F and look for information because they were just spending most of their time organizing the cases instead of working on it. And due to these restrictions they had about confidentiality, because no existing tool was available for them to properly work on criminal cases. So that was really the motivation, I think, confidentiality. And then you have compliance and security that comes with that.
So I'm going to put this in my layman's sort of terms, but I'm envisioning an application that is installed on my laptop. I double click, open the application, and I operate within this application. I'm not using Word. I'm not using Adobe. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So really, as if
Oh,
you were downloading Photoshop, for example, it's something that you download on your machine, you run it. Then the thing that's also today you're using the WhatsApp application on your computer, or if you're using Claude, for example, also have desktop application. But in the background, what they're doing is they're calling their own API. So you share your data externally. It's get out of your computer. And what we built was something where everything stays in the program. So we are running these extremely small local models. And that is really the challenging part, technically
huh.
speaking, because you have to deal with the lawyer's machine. And so the bottleneck on our side is the hardware, where if you have a MacBook Pro M5 chip, then it's going fast and
Right.
it's nice to use. But if you have a typical 8 GB of RAM Windows company laptop, then that's where you struggle with hardware because the text recognition, what we call OCR, extracting data, extracting text from, for example, badly scanned PDF, is performed locally. Then we extract data like the names of the people in the minute, for example, the date, everything is local. Summarize the documents with extremely small LLM to give you an order of magnitude. If we're speaking Claude or ChatGPT, it's in the order of hundreds of millions of parameters. So it's taking a lot of space. If you think about the file, the weights, the amount of memory that these models are taking on a machine, it's hundreds of gigabytes of memory space, which obviously you don't have on your computer. On my computer, we don't have that. And so we have to select smaller models. So we're running, for example, these open source models from Google, the Gemma model, which are 2 billion parameters and which are still a few gigabytes of RAM. So taking some space. But obviously you don't get the same performance and the same reasoning skills of those when you used to using Claude or ChatGPT. So this is basically the bottleneck of going all in on confidentiality, is that you can reach the same performance and the same quality with these big models that are running in the cloud.
So you're developing around hardware constraints, you're developing around the LLM constraints, and you're convincing lawyers to open a new application and change where they do their work, which is, that's like a unicorn, right? It's getting
Yeah.
a lawyer out of their regular sort of productivity suite. That sounds to me like some significant, I guess, for lack of a better word, like moats or real differentiators for the product.
Yeah, it was like there were no existing tools. So there was nothing to copy. So we had to be very creative in the user interface that we were creating because nothing was there before. But it comes also with the challenge of making lawyers accept another interface that they are not familiar with. And so we had some fun anecdotes where some buttons or features were extremely obvious to use, but then in reality, as this is a whole new world and a whole new platform that they've never used, it wasn't that obvious. So it was also fun to create that kind of new application where we really were the masters of how we wanted the user experience to be, and then working with the feedback that's all users were giving us.
That's fascinating. So, do you expect there are broader use cases for these sort of hardware workarounds and the steps you've taken to fix these bottlenecks? Do you think that, without asking you to reveal any business
No,
secret, do you expect that this could be really something that's has broader application than just the criminal context you've identified?
for sure. I think that we had also journalists, for example, being interested in that kind of application, working on extremely sensitive data when they were traveling abroad and didn't trust pushing the data online in a provider. I think that we made the bet that open source model were going to be better and better, which is happening. What is not happening is that they would reach the level of these closed source model. And so that's really what we're struggling with right now. It's a question, as you mentioned, of hardware. So, we had many users that were telling us that they had some very recent machine and they didn't understand why it was a bit slow. And then by very recent machine, it was a 2011 MacBook Air with like 8 gigabytes of RAM and operating system version that I didn't know was still running. So, you have these lawyers that change the machine every 10 years. And so even though the hardware continue, like what Apple is doing with the Apple Silicon chips is very impressive. And we see a huge gap between these Windows machine and the Apple Silicon machine. It's running very fast and it's very convenient on these MacBook, but it's not the main adoption in the law firm and enterprise world. It's really about this Windows machine. And we see also some progress there with the chips. Intel is doing some good job, ARM also. But you have the hardware bottleneck and also open source model. We've seen mostly last year with the release of the DeepSeek model, Chinese labs that are doing an amazing job at relieving and open sourcing everything that they find, and including how they train the model and also eventually the weight of the model so that you can host it on your own servers, even in-house, in a company or in some one of the big cloud provider that you trust with the stricter data processing agreements. But they are still not at the level of what we've seen and what I guess we will talk about after, which is the Claude Code revolution and these Claude Opus 4.5, 4.6 model, the GPT 5.2, 5.3 model, way better than those models. And so people are using that, even lawyers and even part of all users are getting used to getting that kind of quality. So it's very difficult to come back to something that is more confidential, more secure, but where quality of the automation is obviously less good. So these are really the challenges when you're going full offline and full local model. So you either have the compute, have the hardware, have the servers in-house to host these bigger models. And so you're going more into a on-prem model where you can host these DeepSeek, for example, LLM that I was talking about. If you're going there on the local and typical hardware as we went, then you are limited by these extremely small language model where that aren't catching up yet to the more powerful models. So that's basically the picture of what's happening now. But to answer your question, I really think that there is a future for the legal model. We might be a bit early, but there are definitely stakes into sending your data, personal data, clients' data to these big labs servers or these big provider servers. So there is a world for more control with local models that you have full control on.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that Agent Skills Hub and Lovable and you know, in your response, I'm hearing themes like, like niche products, local. The word atomized came to my mind. Can you tell me about what that hub is and what you're trying to do with it?
Sure. Yeah, so I guess it started with myself just experimenting with the Opus 4.5 release in late November. I've been using AI to help me in my coding work for a long time, I guess, more in a Q&A fashion where I was still writing most of the code myself and using these tools for optimizing some snippet of it, asking some very specific question about, yeah, mostly optimization actually. And in early December, I was seeing a lot of talk about the magic of that new model, Opus 4.5 from Anthropic, especially within the Claude Code harness, which includes giving it tools and the file system so that it can really explore and orchestrate and plan things by itself. It was the first time I went full agentic mode where I gave it the opportunity to come up with an implementation plan, brainstorm idea together, and then fully implement it. Up until that point, I was kind of disappointed a bit by the quality of the code that was being output by such model, even though Anthropic already did a huge and a great job with the previous model, the Sonnets 4.5 and 4.7. But it was the first time that I experimented the magic of Claude Code running in an autonomous fashion and doing actually my job, which was the second time that I experimented that with AI. First one was the release of ChatGPT in November 2022. That really wow moment happened for the second time like 2 months ago. And so I was really shocked after that week because then I spent the week just orchestrating Claude session, reviewing the work of Claude, and it changed completely the dynamic of my own work as a programmer. I had a chat with my co-founder Malik about that, and I kept drawing analogy with how Claude is working with Claude Code. I have a task in mind. We discuss together how we can implement it, and then by itself, it will look into my code base, find the relevant information across all these files, gather all that information, make a summary, and then come up with ideas. I kept drawing analogy with how a lawyer could work with many contracts, many documents, many client data to perform a given task. And so I urged my friend Malik to just try it, to just give it a try for a legal workflow, no matter what it is. And then he come back after the weekend and he had that same mind blown moment. He said that it was extremely cool and we never experienced something like that. And I think that the fact that working with extremely small local model as a main job, sometimes we are being a bit frustrated by not being into what these tools and are allowing these closed model, these bigger models, and we're not really part of all the progress that is being made with the bigger models. So it was really fun to just test it. And so we got really excited by it. And so we communicated about it just because we found it was very cool. Nobody was talking about Claude Code for legal, and something that also ticked a lot for us was what they released 2 months earlier that went a bit under the radar for me personally, was this skills format, which basically allows you to encapsulate methodology and expertise as a markdown file, as a prompt. But as a prompt that these coding agents are able to apply in a very reliable way. And so it's basically that intercommunication, very easy and very seamless intercommunication between the human and the machine, where you just explain how you work in plain language. You don't have to deal with these workflow building blocks that you drag and drop, or you don't have to code your own library with existing SDK, for example. You just explain how you work as you would explain it to an intern in a file. And then you have these models that are able to take on that and then use their magic, which is the exploration of your folder, of your files, and then potentially being able to call API for interacting with some search engine you would need for case law or for any kind of other external information. And they just solve what you ask them to solve. And the impressiveness about all these agents is the way they can react to something that is unexpected. You would, for example, explain in a skill that you typically go look for this kind of case law when you are working on that task, but you don't precise exactly on which website you go, how you do it exactly. Typically, when you build your own workflow with a workflow builder, these tools like NA10, SimStudio, or I know that the big players also have their own workflow builders. If you miss some step, then it just crashed. You have an error, or for example, if you have an NDA review pipeline and don't provide an NDA, you provide another kind of contract, it will still run through the pipeline because it doesn't really, except if you put guardrails or stuff. What I mean is that it's very deterministic, which comes with good sides because you want that, especially in legal, but also it cannot deal with unexpected behavior. And what's really impressive with Claude and these agentic model is that they can react to these unexpected events by asking you for more information, just stopping there in the pipeline, asking you for more information, or doing a research on its own, like doing a web research or going to connect to an API that you've put, for example, in another skills that it has access to. And when you work with these tools, you are often very impressed by this flexibility and its autonomous manners for this model to interact with you. And so to come back to that, we just found that very exciting and decided to talk about it online and to share what this technology could unlock. And here, even after a month and a half, I think that we are still very early. You've probably seen the vibe coding wave among lawyers, which I found extremely cool. I think this community is also starting to experiment a lot with code right now and skilled, not only for building, which was the case previously, using these tools for building their own application, but now you also start to have that realization that you might not need an interface for everything, and that these tools, they allow you to kind of get the end results and to get the deliverables. And you gave them a mission and they are able to use all the tools that they have at their disposal to give you this end results. And so I'm seeing that more and more online, and I find it very cool to see lawyers getting interested, but also building their own skills with the help of these coding agents.
That was an incredibly precise and illuminating overview of what we've seen happening in the last 3 to 6 months. I want to break it down maybe into two sort of constituencies impacted by these developments. On the one hand, you have legal tech founders or product developers, and on the other hand, you have lawyers. Let me start with the product side. Am I hearing correctly that if you are a legal tech founder, let's say you're a lawyer with an idea, to me, it sounds like one of the takeaways is the differentiator for your product is probably not going to be the coding or how exactly you develop the product. It's really going to be in unlocking how the legal work is done, because the real magic of the tool will be not because the agents and the skills, they're going to basically do the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah.
But what the agent of skills and the Claude Code, Claude Work can't do, it doesn't know exactly what is the right way to achieve a specific project for a particular client with a specific need. And so if I'm thinking about that right, it sounds like it puts in a premium on lawyers' contributions to tech companies. No?
Yeah, I think that's, if you think about what a legal engineer is, I'm not sure there's like a formal definition of it, but from what I've seen, that's just someone building at the intersection of tech and law, someone that's designing and implementing that tech-driven solution, automating these legal process, these legal workflow, legal work. And I think that I actually have a disadvantage of coming from the engineering background, being interested in law, rather than a lawyer being interested in tech, because the parts that I have the most expertise in, which is the software engineering part, the coding part, is being commoditized by these models. And that's why we've seen that vibe coding wave, where you have these lawyers that are able to create, to innovate, and to really get out some tools that they maybe have thought for a long time about. And now they are able to build those kind of tools because these models are extremely good at providing good quality, and they will get only better and better in the future. Now you have a lot of concern about security, deployment and stuff, but I think that it's just a matter of time before you have these models that also are extremely good at providing not only great code quality, but also secure, robust. In the other hand, these models are still bad at legal, because legal has always been very closed ecosystem, not easily accessible. So it's not a huge part of the training data of these models. Whereas codes, in the other hand, you have, well, it's really in the DNA of the computer science world to open source stuff. That's why we've seen such a huge progress in the past decades, where we just like to open source stuff, because thanks to that, we are making great progress in many CS domains. So that's why we had these models getting aggressively better and better into coding. And now what's missing really is, because we're talking about legal, but also maybe it's the same for finance or for all the knowledge work, it's the knowledge part of a specific vertical. And so I think that the lawyers, they are in a good position now to build their skills and package their expertise that only them and their peers have, thanks to these models. And so really they are in a position where they are able now to leverage these coding agents to perform automation that they own, thanks to just getting out the expertise and the knowledge that they have out of their mind.
At the same time, I don't want to hand wave the concerns around security, risk, etc. I'm a lawyer at a law firm, and my law firm wants to embrace experimentation. They want to create sandbox environments for me to use Claude Code and Claude Cowork, and they want me to have the freedom to deploy agents in real time and be really good at servicing my clients by doing that. What is going to be the infrastructure that the law firm has to put into place so that I, as the lawyer, can do that securely without breaching confidentiality of the clients, without running into bugs and crashes because something I do doesn't interact correctly with the rest of the IS system? Help me kind of understand what infrastructure has to be built out to support that kind of sandbox experiment future.
Yeah, so it's the big question, right? And I think that there are no definitive or clear answer to that, because the ecosystem is so new that we're still wondering a lot how we can best handle that part in that ecosystem of skills and agents. I think let's take the example of Claude. For example, if you want to build with Claude, or if you want to run your legal automation with Claude, you basically have two choices. First, you subscribe to a subscription directly to Anthropic. Then you have the consumer subscription that comes with less strict data agreements. You can still opt out for training the next model, but I do not think that it is compliant at all with the enterprise world. So it's more for hobbyists like us to just experiment with it. You have a few plans, like the Pro plan at $20 a month, and then the Max plans that if you are a more power user at $100 and $200. And that's what I've been sharing, because I think that most of the people that read my post right now are these kind of lawyers that want to experiment with build and creating the automation, but it's not meant for enterprise. If you want to stay with the Anthropic, then you have the enterprise plan that comes with the stricter data processing agreement, but still not fully compliant, especially in Europe, because it's Anthropic that is in charge of processing your data. So it's all going to their US servers. I think they are getting into a Europe server, but still, I haven't heard a European company that it would go with that path. So subscription, it's difficult if you want full control over your data and compliance in Europe, for example. Then you have the second path, which is you can still use these models, but not host it on the servers from Anthropic, but host it on one of the big players, one of the big cloud providers. So you have Amazon, Bedrock, AWS, Google with Vertex AI, you have Microsoft with Microsoft Foundry. And so there you have, obviously, it's more suited to enterprise requirements. It comes with very strict data agreements. And then you can choose also the region where the endpoint, the model will be hosted. You are guaranteed that you will be using Opus 4.5 or 4.6, the same model that you would use typically in a consumer subscription, but you would use it in Microsoft servers in Paris, for example. The downside of it is that you pay a bit more, because you pay what we call per token. So every token that is output by this model, you pay for it. But then it comes with these stricter control over your data. So it is technically possible, and it's obviously well integrated into the whole ecosystem, because I think that a lot of the revenue comes from that API and pay-per-token path. And so that's what most companies are implementing now. Law firms that are interested into these world of cloud automation and skills, we are getting contacted, for example, by firms and legal departments that find what we are sharing, all the open source blocks, they find very cool. They want to experiment with that. They want to own the IP, which is also a problem when you subscribe to the big players, to the habit that you spend a lot of time building your workflow in that closed ecosystem. But then if something better or an alternative, cheaper or whatever comes up the next day, then you're kind of stuck and trapped into the ecosystem. What I found extremely cool with these skills is that it has become standard. So it was originally released by Anthropic in the 16th of October, and it was working only with Claude. But as you can imagine, it's a very simple concept. It's just a bunch of files that are packaged together into a folder that you can zip and just share. And so what's really cool to see is that the other big player like OpenAI and Cursor and even Google with Gemini, they adopted that standard pretty quickly. And so by the time that I was hit by the Claude Code wave in early December, it had officially become the standard and was supported by all the players. And so what's extremely cool, and also what I've been sharing with this VS Code setup that we can talk about a bit later also, was that you don't get locked into a specific vendor. And so you can create your own automation and you can spend the necessary time to create this automation, but then use it. If today it's Claude, that it's better than use it with Claude today, but tomorrow it will be GPT 5.3 or 5.4 and so on. And then the next day it will be Gemini, and you are not closed, you're not trapped into one vendor, and you can reuse this automation that you built from one player to the other. And so that's also something that I find extremely cool when sharing with what we're experimenting online. And yeah, I basically lost
Well, can
trust.
you, no, really interesting stuff. And can you tie it back to to Lovable, the Agent Skills Hub?
Sure.
What exactly is that platform offering to users?
Yeah, so I think it started with just sharing our excitement about that. So it started by showing example of what this technology was. So Malik, my co-founder, spent some time in Christmas building a website. I spent some time in Christmas building a few example skills, notably with GDPR compliance, for example, to give a hint of what it was, how you build that, how you can use this. And so at the moment, the Lovable is really a hub where you can come and learn about all that. You have a bunch of skills, which was pretty cool to see, is that very quickly we had these tech savvy lawyers or law students that immediately clicked and understood how significant that technology will be in the coming year. And so they decided to also build their own skill and submit it to Lovable. And so we had a few lawyers. We had that community also building of lawyer wanted to share what they built. So on the website, you can find that. I think that we have something like 30, 35 skills at the moment. You can see the skills are there. Like there are two big categories that are emerging, what we call the domain skills and the utility skills. So the domain skills, so by the way, it's just a term that we came up with, like there is no clear definition about it, but the domain skills, we call that way because it's really the expertise that the lawyer package, really how they review NDA, how they do due diligence. It's really your own process of performing a legal task. And so it's linked to the legal domain. And then you have the utility skills, and that's where my expertise and my experience can come into play, which is you want to review NDA. This will happen with Microsoft Word. So you need a skill. So you need a tool for Claude to interact with Microsoft Word. And so you can build a skill with that. And that's where it's very powerful, and why I'm so excited about all that. You can start chaining skills where you would typically, for example, my friend Malik made a video the other day where that's perfectly illustrates this chaining three skills together, where with one message, the message being, hey, I just received NDA from a client. Can you please go look into my Outlook email box, download that contract, review it my own way, and then give me the redlined document with the modification and the explanation for the modification in comments. And so it's a process that takes 5 to 10 minutes, and that's chaining actually 3 skills. One skills for interacting with Outlook. And so this is part of the utility category, where you build a skill that you explain to Claude how you can connect to your Outlook email box. And so you give it the code to access it via API, and it does that all by itself. And so lawyers that all you have to do is just have the skill ready into its folder and just ask the same thing, and no need to know what's happening behind, no need to write code by themselves. I mean, Claude has the methodology to interact with your email box. And then it's loading another skill, which is the NDA review skill. And so it's reviewing exactly how you told it in the skills to review the contracts. And then finally, you ask it also to do the redlining in the market directly in the contract. And so for that, it's loading a last skill, which is the Microsoft Word skill, where you, again, explain exactly how you can interact with Word documents to do the redlining, to change the font, to change the title, to search for some specific text, to add a comment. And then you end up with the final version of the reviewed contract that is ready to send for your clients, for example.
Yeah, what's kind of less clear to me is whether we're going to see the average lawyer doing the sorts of thing you're describing in 2-3 years, or whether it's more like there's a development team, a product team, a legal operations team internally that is identifying all the different skills and identifying what kind of agents should be deployed based on the specific needs of their lawyers, and that they're the ones actually using these tools. Do you have any thoughts on how practical it is to expect the average lawyer to be doing these things? Because I can imagine it going both ways. I can imagine it becoming so simple and intuitive and natural that people just develop a whole new skill. Or I could see going the other way, which is it's just one step too many. It's a little too techy. And so you end up having like a higher level up where within your practice group, for example, there's someone in charge of helping deploy these things, but not every lawyer is doing it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Maybe I badly described, I think I went too into the technical description, but really what is happening is that in the end, you're sending one message to Claude. It's loading everything by itself from something like the Lovable Hub, for example. We've built an extension that allows to preload these kind of skills.
Yeah.
So that's really what I meant. It's that if you give it the tools it needs, and basically it needs to be able to interact with Word document, maybe some Excel documents, it needs to interact with API. So I'm seeing a world where, and that's why we really like that open ecosystem that we're trying to build with Lovable, because you obviously cannot do it all by yourself. You have too many API to interact with, too many tools to interact with. I see a world where every interface, every website, every application that exists today might eventually build their own skill. So creates that package methodology that you can import in Claude, in ChatGPT, in Gemini, to let the model know how to interact with one specific interface, one specific website. This is not the lawyer job. Ideally, what you want is an infrastructure that is handling all this preloading of skills for the user, such that the user don't even have to tell it explicitly to chain these kind of tools, to chain these kind of skills. The model, and that's also the beauty of these skills, they are able to know from the context and from the conversation that you have with the user they are able to know when they need to activate such or the skill. And so you ask it to review NDA, it's able to know, okay, let me first look, but it's doing that in the background. It's not even telling you that, it's embedded in the background. It's thinking, let me look if I have an NDA review skill. Okay, I'll need also to edit that Word document. Let me look if I have a Word edit document skill. And then it's doing all these chaining by itself. And as a user, you obviously don't want to spend time on building these tools, but I think that this will be the role of third parties to handle and to provide these kind of methodologies such that Claude now has the expertise. So it already has that kind of general intelligence and these reasoning skills. And then thanks to this new formats, to the skills formats, it can now have extra knowledge about specific tools that it can use to accomplish one or another task.
That's interesting. So, and that's kind of an open source theory of how things play out. Is there a version of this where we end up like in the closed ecosystem, right? Take, for example, the consumer apps on smartphones. We basically have Android, we have Apple, we have an open ecosystem, a closed ecosystem, but even the open ecosystem on Android, right? It's still, there's a lot of stickiness there. It's not super easy to plug and play, even with the open ecosystem. So essentially we have two closed or closed-ish kind of ecosystems. I guess there's a risk that we end up there, right? The closed ecosystem is the app store, essentially. You've got a lot of people developing the workflows. They're developing the solutions. They're developing what I'm thinking of as like, almost like an app. There's an atomized market of many people doing that, but they're all kind of going to the same platform. Would it be the LLM providers that would sort of be the ones to most position to create those kind of ecosystems?
It's a possibility. And the question is, what would it bring over similar app store that would be open, knowing that intuitively people would prefer, I guess, the open version of that, except if that closed version comes with additional features, maybe in terms of, as we discussed earlier, maybe security and compliance. Yeah, it could totally be a thing, but uh, I think, as I said, it's difficult to build it out by yourself in terms of these utility skills. If every individual player builds their own skill for their own platform or for their own API, would they prefer to put that into the closed, the equivalent of closed app store of the open one? I don't know. I would be tempted to say that maybe it's the CS version toolkit there that I would personally prefer to put that into the open app store. And for the other thing, which is more about the domain skill, I think that you could have big players. You could have Ligora coming up with its own hub, like a Lovable style, with hundreds or thousands of legal skills. But what we're seeing here is that it is so easy and convenient to create your own skill, to create your own way of working, that would you be, as a lawyer, would you be satisfied and happy to use another way of reviewing an NDA, a way that has been dictated by a legal engineer from that particular firm? Or wouldn't be it easier to just create your own way and run it in an ecosystem, that a more open ecosystem that allows to do it? I think that the movement we've seen with the vibe coding is that you had basically a few players that every lawyer was using the platform, but we are entering that more personalized and customization era, where the lawyer is now able to develop their own tool the way they like it. And then they might want a button there, they want a particular type, and now they can build that. And I'm seeing the same thing with skills, even in a more obvious way, because as I told you, the skill, it's just a file and it's just how you do a particular thing. So why would you pay for NDA review skills, which is not even how you do the NDA review, rather than just creating your own way and running it in all the different, because you have so many opportunities now. You can, if one is closing everything, then you can just build your own skill and going into some other provider that's not as close. You have, just to give you an example of the players that supports running skills right now, you have Google with Gemini, you have OpenAI with ChatGPT, you have Claude with Claude Code on 3 different platforms. You can use it in Claude Code in the terminal. You can use it in the new desktop application with the Cowork panel. You can use it on their website directly. You have Manus also that's supporting that. You have a whole ecosystem that is supporting this thing. And so I'm not sure that closing all that is the move to go from one of these big players. And if they do, you risk just having people going and seeing elsewhere where they can enjoy a more open ecosystem.
There's a very positive outlook on it. I think the idea of customizable, personalized deployment of technology is a really interesting version of legal practice that we can imagine in the near future. It would be a reshaping of how we think about technology as users. I truly have not heard a better explanation of all these tools packaged together in a cohesive story. So I really appreciate you telling us that story. And I'm sure my listeners will enjoy hearing about it as well. I find myself amazed at how quickly things are happening. And in the span of months, you're experiencing changes that normally people would experience in a career.
Yeah.
Seems like we don't know exactly where we're headed, but if you're thinking about technology and law in the same sentence, you're probably on the right path.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also get that feeling of things moving extremely fast. I reassure you, everyone is feeling it's also in my domain. You cannot take a day off without waking up to X new models and X new technologies. I think what I really like is that we're seeing a path here with these agentic models. And today it's skills, tomorrow it will be something else. I think the goal is not to go too much in one of these technologies. It will evolve. From what I've tested so far, skills are the easiest way to build your own workflows and to do any kind of work initially for coding work, but now it's coming for knowledge work. We've talked a lot about legal, obviously, on this podcast. I think it's just the beginning. I shared Lovable. I think it was 1 month ago. It feels like it's already a year, but I'm really excited to see how it goes. I couldn't imagine all the positiveness and the support we've received on the reaction when we shared that publicly. I think that we will continue to share our insights and what we learn along the way, how to best build these skills, how to give an ecosystem, and we believe in the open ecosystem. So that's what we will continue pushing. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what lawyers and legal professionals build with that. I think it's great that lawyers can also reappropriate a bit back the IP. And I loved seeing that vibe coding movement where every lawyer was creating its own software. And I think the next move will be creating their own automation with these agents. So I'm really looking forward to the following next months here in 2026.
Well, I have to tell you, we in the legal industry are extremely lucky to be attracting talent such as yourself, technical talent into the industry. We've been in a period of sort of stasis technologically in some ways for a long time. It's really exciting to have that kind of energy and skill coming in. I look forward to playing with these tools myself. So thank you for introducing us to that.
Yeah, nice. Let me know how it goes. If I can help in any way, just let me know.
Great. Thank you.
All right, catch.